This is a story of Razel, who teleported to a different world in search of worthy mates, but the situation turned out. The protagonist got failed and thought that if it had gone well, he would have been able to make a super heavyweight sword with a density that's on par with a neutron star. And it seemed like it was impossible to harness that type of magic, and at that rate, he would never be able to compete on equal footing against the ultimate lifeforms. He sighed and activated flight magic and thought that had been a while, so he would head to a well-populated city. And he remembered things where one stated that they were heading in different directions and other mentioned that he couldn't die right then and he still have his family in the countryside to take care of, and the other cried and ran while stating that he had something urgent to take care of. And the protagonist contemplated the scenes and guessed that there was a limit to so long, and he should find some teammates even though he really didn't want to though. Just then, he noticed some disturbance in flight mode and wondered if his flight mode was malfunctioning and instantly denied that there was nothing wrong with it, and wondered what was up with that space distortion and pondered that if the distortion starts sucking things up, they would have some serious problems. Suddenly, a hand came out and the protagonist got astonished, and then a lady came out of the flight mode. And the protagonist asked who she was and she greeted and mentioned that she was the summoning goddess, Risha. For a sec, he stared at her and he turned his head and laughed, contemplating that she called herself a goddess, and he flipped his head at his position and asked what she were trying to say. And Risha apologized and mentioned that she was the equivalent of what he would call a goddess from a different world, and explained that she traveled to that world in hopes of summoning a hero. And whenever she appeared she should be in the vicinity of the strongest person in that world, and asked if he was not the one. Perplexed, the protagonist pondered that first she called herself a goddess, and then she was going on about summoning heroes to another world, and wondered what she was trying to do, if roleplay a fairy tale, and mentioned that it was really not a fairy tale. He pondered that she supposed through the anti-magic barrier that he came up with himself and ready his mind. And he introduced himself as Razel, the strongest in the world in terms of humans, and inquired if he just have to follow her as a hero as he might be able to subjugate superior lifeforms if he had her with him. Overwhelmed, Risha asked if he was willing to come with her, and thanked her, and he inquired what did he have to do. And she responded that he had to follow the king's order and defeat the demon lord, and he agreed. Then, she indicated flight mode and asked if he was ready, and he admitted, and she touched it. And Razel's body was getting sucked in. And Razel pondered that one wouldn't get anywhere without taking any risks, and he guessed that he shouldn't struggle while closing his eyes. Then, he opened his eyes and he was within the palace. He looked and pondered what the other world was like, and the man mentioned that he would like to bid them all a very warm welcome and stated that he was the king of that country, and the one who summoned all of them. Razel contemplated that it looked like he wasn't the only one who got summoned while looking at others. The people whispered of those for all of the ones who got summoned that time and agreed. Razel pondered that he was right, but questioned if those were really the best of their worlds, and guessed that he would take a look at their statuses, and just then, a man stated to allow him to talk a little about that world, and Razel decided that he should listen to that first. The man explained that the beings in that world was divided into 3 different groups: humans, demons, and demihumans, and there weren't many demihumans around, so they wasn't much of a threat, and Razel pondered that it wasn't much different from his world, and the man further stated that the problem was the demons, and demons had been at war for a long time. But recently then the demons' influence had started increasing at an alarming rate, and if that continues, they would soon all be under the demons' control. He stated that summoned hero, civil servant Frodo, summoned hero, adventurer Leal, summoned hero mercenary Banza, and summoned hero, unknown Razel, and this they were called forth. And Razel smirked while pondering that it was just like when he was hunting demons back then, and he just defeated them as training. And countries all around the world started thanking him. Then, the man bowed, requesting them to lend their strength to defeat them, and mentioned that they would prepare a lifetime of rewards if they were to defeat them. Frodo mentioned that was an attractive deal, and Leal commented that he would be able to test his strength too, and Banza stated that he had no objections in defeating humanity's enemy, and Razel said nothing.
Hold on. If you guys are loving this video, make sure to comment, "We are loving it," because that is how I get to know that. Now, getting back to the story.
Further, the man stated that they would then test his current combat capabilities and requested to put their hands on that crystal ball. The crystal ball was an appraiser, whose combat compatibility calculator contained inside formula identifiable, and it combines raw magic power and the ability to control it and turns it into numbers. Leal stated that he was first, since he was the one there, and he touched the crystal ball, and the ball gleamed and the men rushed and saw it and stated combat power, and screamed that it was combat power of 4097, and was amazing, and the king and others got astonished. Razel pondered if those numbers was really that good, and then Frodo mentioned that it was his turn, and he went to touch it, and it was combat power of 3664, and call him amazing as well, and then it was Ban's turn, and it was 3776, as expected by everyone, and they got overwhelmed. The man got excited and mentioned that it was as expected of heroes and called the last person, and Razel got it. Razel went to touch, and all the others three was curious as Razel was unidentifiable, which bothers them. And then Razel stated that it doesn't look like it was reacting, and the man requested to excuse him, and he stated that it might wasn't working well, and he got stunned and wondered if it malfunctioned. And Razel inquired what was wrong, and the men requested him to do it one more time. And Razel did it again, and the man stated and mentioned that the combat power was 0. And the king stunned, and the men stated that the crystal wasn't broken, and Razel got astonished and stated to wait while excusing that machine, but the king exclaimed furiously get out and mentioned that he couldn't recognize 0 as a hero and to get out of that castle instance. And Razel got stunned and requested to wait while mentioning that 0 was an error and he could use magic, and he broke down the coal. Razel requested them to take a look at that and mentioned that atom reconstruction requires a minimum of 7,000 combat power, and thought that it was perfect magic for showing off. The man got astonished that Razel could turn coal into diamond, and Razel asked how was that and asked if they might understand that he could use magic then. And the king asked what was the purpose of that, and stated that a spell that turns a coal into diamond doesn't exist in that world, and Razel was shocked and stated that the spell was quite common, as it was very common in his world though. And the king told him to quiet and mentioned that he was useless and commanded to get out of that castle at once. The other three laughed while calling it pathetic, and Razel mentioned that he couldn't believe that Razel was trying to lie with that fake, and Razel got stunned and contemplated if no one there knows what the spell was. And Risha was also speechless and he got distressed. Then, the king told the men to call the guards, and he did it. The guards caught him, and the king told Razel to take the gem as a farewell gift and to not ever appear in front of him again, and ordered to exile him. In the streets of town, Razel was sitting while holding his head and pondered what should he do then, and remembered the king's words get out. And he couldn't believe that he got betrayal in those games, and he decided to change place, and he should think about what to do from there, and for then he had something to confirm. He entered a weapons and tools workshop where they only put items off their hands, and the shopkeeper welcomed him and mentioned that he was a new face. Razel gave him diamond and asked if he could buy it, and the shopkeeper mentioned that it was a beautiful diamond and asked did he somehow get that from a jewel shop. And Razel mentioned that it was artificially made, and he pondered that he had to sell that at an appropriate store or he might called a scammer again, and he asked the shopkeeper if there was a shop that works with artificial jewels. And the shopkeeper retorted to not mess with him and explained that he had never heard of an artificial diamond, and Razel mentioned that he could use it as an abrasive or cutter. Astonished shopkeeper inquired what he was saying and stated that he would be able to live freely for 10 whole years and if he sell that at a jewel shop. And perplexed Razel pondered that people in that world still haven't artificially created diamonds. And the shopkeeper told him to go to a jewel shop and inquired who in that world could make diamonds anyway, and advised him to save his dream talk for his dreams. Then Razel pondered that he had to get some money fast, as he would hate it if they found out it was an artificial tool. And he asked if there were any inns around there, and how much would one night cost, and the shopkeeper mentioned that it would be around 10k pi. And Razel told him that he needs some money fast, and asked how it would be if he sell him for 70k pi. And the shopkeeper got astonished, and he thrashed the table asking what he was saying, and asked if he was a new charity business person, and Razel denied and stated that he just don't want rumors of me being a scammer to spread, and the shopkeeper denied and stated that was no good, and mentioned that he was going to get smitten at that rate. And Razel mentioned that he needed money right then, and he could saw the value in the diamond, so inquired about a 70k pi first, and shopkeeper mentioned that would work. And he could look that there's a lot on his shoulders anyways. They both shaked hands a deal, and Razel left the shop, and the shopkeeper thanked him for coming and requested to come again. And Razel released that it took some time, but he had some money then, and pondered that alchemy in that world wasn't very advanced, and the currency worth was a lot different too, and he could saw a tough road ahead. In downtown district, in Marie's Inn, Razel took room for 7,000 pi per night. And he flopped over bed while mentioning that he was fired, and he ended up in an unbelievable place, and decided to reassess the situation a little. And he reassessed that he didn't thought that the goddess was a goddess from another world, and he thought that the reason he came there was just some space transferred magic named summoning to another world. And he remembered shopkeeper mentioning that he had never heard of to make merchandise before though, and the standard of magical development of that world was just way too different from his. Just then, Razel sat and he stunned if it was really the another world, and he initiated quantum motion analysis magic and figured that there was differences of sections of the law of physics and even materials that he had never seen before. And he flopped and assumed that what had happened so far wasn't the self-proclaimed goddess game, and then it was safe to thought that the king exiling was outside of her expectations. Then, from then on he should take action as the hero that was meant to save the world, and wondered if defeating the demon lord or whatever satisfies the goddess, and wondered what was a demon lord in the first place, and thought it as a narcissistic who was skilled at magic and thug-like. He wondered if those demons had a monarchy, but he guessed that was how his world worked, and they have intelligence to adhere to a monarchy. And to put it in extreme terms, the demons of the world was not evil, and he know too little regarding the state of affairs of that world, and however, he didn't think that he would get any support from the humans since he got exiled. Then, he finally decided to go meet the demon lord, and he wondered if he could use magic as he did in his previous world. And he initiated storage magic, and took out recon satellite printer attached which flies into the sky to survey the ground surface via satellite image, and he figured that he could use them without any problems and decided to create a map of the path to what seemed like the demon lord's castle, and he would take a short nap until the map was completed. The next morning, Razel woke up and stated that he accidentally slept till morning, and the printing was finished, and he figured that the map looked spot on too. And he collected the scroll, and initiated storage magic and felt presence there, and he decided to take a look, while putting the scroll in storage magic. Then, he activated high detection magic, and figured that there were 5 of them, and guessed that he would try intercepting their voice transforming magic. He wondered if there was no mistake that he was at that inn, and if they were assassins sent by the kings, and Razel came out. The people outside there mentioned that Guy had come out and figured that he was the summoned hero that was dragged by the guards the day before, and Razel contemplated that it seemed that he had completely made an enemy out of the king. The one assassin commanded others to be in position and asked if they remembered the plan, and other agreed and stated that after assassinating the target, they would bring his head as evidence, and Razel confirmed that those were the assassins that was after him and decided to took that chance to use them to his advantage then. And just then, the assassin mentioned that there was no one in the vicinity of the target, and command to execute the plan, and they blowed and a needle which directly stuck into Razel's neck, and Razel understood that it was the poison that would render him unconscious in a matter of seconds, and he thought that if it was just that level of poison, he could somehow manage by continuously deploying protection magic, and he intentionally fall down. The assassin came down, and one mentioned that they had successfully assassinated the target, and other states that they would cut the head as evidence, and other roger it. While one moved to cut Razel's head, he activated swift movement, and then lightning magic, and the light hit all the assassins, and all fall down, and Razel mentioned that he would have them sleep for a little bit, and he decided to see what was on his inventory, and it was multifunctional stem cell, which was a cellular item that serves as the base of clones, and he found it, and pondered that if he kept failing to create clones with high combat abilities, Sohao had stored it away for safekeeping, and it was actually something that he intended to clone himself with to use it for combat training, and it might not be able to copy his abilities, but it could still pretend to be his corpse. He implied cellular differentiation, and his clone formed, and Razel added the blowdart wound to it and provided him with some clothes, and he decided to not keep him alive. Then, he had already casted area recovery magic, so he was sure that they would take care of the rest, and stretched while mentioning that some unwanted business came in, and then he decided to head to where the demon lord lives. Then, the assassins came back to their senses and wondered what in the world happened, and the other replied that he wasn't sure and mentioned that it could be the target's defense magic, and just they wondered what happened to the target, and they spotted that he was lying there dead. The assassins stressed out that they wasted their time out and cut down the head and picked it up. The other assassins asked if they got the head already, and others admitted mad they decided to go. They left the remaining body of Razel there. On the other side, Razel reached the demon lord's castle, and while he trying to get inside, the guards stopped him, while asking what did business he had there, and Razel mentioned that he had to talk to the demon lord, and inquired if it was okay if they could guide him to them. And the both guards stated at each other, and one denied and retorted him to not screw with him, and the other asked if he thought that a human could see the demon lord just because they wanted to talk. Razel sincerely apologized for the sudden visit, and mentioned that then he would make an appointment, and the guards got astonished and exclaimed that why would they let a human to make an appointment just to meet the demon lord, and told him to look at his clothes at the first place and mentioned that he looked like a summoned hero. Razel stated that he was a summoned hero, but he was exiled by the king, and the guard about exiled, and Razel added that he was almost assassinated by agents sent by the king that morning too, and mentioned that he might be human, but WTH what was happened to him. He was sure it wasn't weird for him to be on the demon lord's side then, and asked what did they think so. The guard pointed the weapon onto his cheek and mentioned that in the same way in the past, another summoned hero pretended to proclaim that the enemy was a friend and mentioned that they wouldn't fall for the same trap again. Razel pondered that was troublesome and wondered if that strategy was used before, and thought that brainwashing was an option and decided to change his question, and he pointed and stated that at the top of that tower over there, it was pathetic excuse for a teleportation magic obstructing barrier set up, and one guard filled with anger for calling it pathetic, and shrieked that how dare he insult the demon's lord carefully constructed omnipotent all-purpose barrier, and the other guard warned him. But Razel thanked for telling him and figured that was there. Frustrated, guard realized that he was gone and done it, and he stood still and stated that if Razel think that he could get past that teleportation obstruction, he would like to see, and Razel agreed and wondered that he didn't need any strong teleportation magic for that level of barrier, and he constructed magic circle, and he started vanishing. The guards were stunned that Razel vanished, and wondered what was that, and Razel reached the teleportation obstruction and saw the demon lord's room, and he looked, and just then a demon girl noticed him and got stunned and asked who he was. Stunned and frightened, the demon girl asked who he was, and Razel pondered that she had about 100 times more magic powers than the ones at the gate, and she had a decent amount of strength too. She shrieked that why was there a human there, and asked if he was telling her that her teleportation barrier didn't work. And Razel mentioned that if she was the one who set up that barrier, she must be a demon lord. He asked if she was demon lord, and the demon girl mentioned that she indeed was 10 demon lord, and inquired who was he and why he was there. And Razel apologized for passing through her barrier without asking, and she got astonished, and he explained that he would feel bad had he damaged something she put effort into making so as it wasn't destroyed, and asked her to forgive him. And she denied and explained that the fact that he were able to simply pass through because that barrier was already ridiculous. She contemplated who was he and what was he trying to do. And just then he introduced himself as Razel and mentioned that he was originally summoned to that world as a hero. However, he was exiled due to circumstances, so he was on neither humans or demons' side at the moment, and he was there to ask her about that world. She got infuriated, and he mentioned that he would ask one more time if she was demon lord, and she got infuriated and repeated if the summoned hero was there to ask questions, and told him to not play with her. And he contemplated that if he chose the wrong method to get through to her, and he raised his finger, and she attacked him while calling him impudent and keep saving himself by his finger barrier. And pondered that was troubling, and even he didn't have any proof to show that he was fired as a hero. She mentioned that he was quite competent, and he contemplated what he should do. Just then, a girl came asking if she was okay, and the man covered her while asking who that man was. Razel pondered that it might come off as a threat, and he raised his head while pondering that he had to make them believe that talking it out peacefully was the better option, and he held both of them upside, and the demon lord filled with tears, and he took them back at the floor, and they got stunned, and the mentioned that he was certain that he was bit just then, and the demon lord asked if they revived, and Razel explained that if that would be the case, he didn't and never even intended to kill the two of them, and she repeated their neck, and Razel mentioned that she was overreacting, and both Sarina and the men got stunned. Then Razel asked if they thought that they would die just because their head went flying. And the demon lord pointed him and stated that he was the weird one, and there was never been a precedent of a spell that lets someone survive after losing their head, and Razel inquired if absorbed in politics dulled her understanding of magic, mentioned that he guessed that no one would criticize the demon lord. Sarina told him to not be ridiculous and mentioned that she was Lord because she was the strongest, and Demon Lord exclaimed that it was obvious that man was well beyond their sense of common knowledge and told her to stop with the unnecessary utterances. Then, the Demon Lord asked, and he said that he was there to gather information, and told him to inquire about anything he wished. Razel mentioned that he was glad that she was finally feel like answering, and Sarina mentioned to Demon Lord that still she wasn't sure whether that man was an enemy or not and if he was one by any chance, but Demon Lord interrupted and stated that it would come to that when it comes for that, and she had to just give up and laughed. Sarina was perplexed, and Demon Lord explained that in the first place, instead of continuing to receive damage there, it would be better to bet on the options that leaves them with some hope, and added that she had feelings that man should become an ally and asked if they should properly talk it out. She mentioned that there was no need for concern, and told him to stay on standby outside, and Razel contemplated that it got a little bit rough, but it seemed like it would settle down then. And both Sarina and the man looked at each other and bowed and stated that her wish was her command. Demon Lord and Razel sat on her chair and mentioned to hear his questions or material or whatever. And Razel thanked her, and he mentioned that he heard that the human race was about to be dominated by the rapidly expanding demon race, and asked if that was true. And she kept sitting till and he asked what was wrong, and she exclaimed everything and explained that first of all, the demons had not grown in firepower in hundreds of years, and rather than growing stronger, they have been growing weaker, and in fact, they never thought of putting humans under one control, and added that if anything they was the ones forcing unfavorable conditions onto them. And she flipped scroll while mentioning to give it a read, and Razel asked what was that, and she mentioned that it was a contract between humans and demons, and as the scroll was in Razel's hand, he could feel the king's magic from it, and he asked if it was original and if she was sure, and she agreed. Razel opened the scroll and read that if any human were to commit a crime in the demon's borders, they would be judged by the laws of humans, and humans would not bear any responsibility if anything were to happen to the demons and humans. Stunned, Razel asked show they make such an unreasonable contract, and she mentioned that the demon king a few generations ago was killed by the hero, and it had always been the case for the strongest demon to become the demon lord, so the moment the demon lord died, it was clear that no one was able to defeat the hero by then, and if they were not to above by those conditions, the hero would take her throne and kill her, so she did it. Razel think that why did the goddess summon them if she already had such a powerful hero, and wondered if she summoned a new one every time another dies, and he inquired if he could ask her one thing and questioned if the hero was still alive then, and she agreed and mentioned that she would have destroyed the contract if it wasn't for that, and he asked why did they summon him, and she asked did he wasn't exiled, and he agreed and asked about it, and she mentioned that then luck was on his side, that he barely escaped death, and Razel was perplexed, and she told him that he was summoned there as a sacrifice. Demon Lord told him that people like him are called sacrifices, and he asked if she could tell him more about the details, and she stated that about 600 years ago, which was about the time of the first summoning of a hero, apparently, at that time, the hero was nowhere near as strong. He was no match against the 4 heavenly kings, against Jack and Sarina's parents, and he contemplated if the parents of those two just then, and she added that all the heroes that came after that were pretty much the same, and the higher-ups from humans were extremely discouraged and ordered the goddess to bring a stronger hero, and he added that leads to everything up till then. And she agreed and inquired how did he understood everything, and he pondered that was really someone from that world who made a mage tool that advanced, and asked if the goddess made that magic tool too, and Demon Lord admitted and mentioned that the combined hero was so much stronger than the Demon Lord during that time, and with the combined hero, they made unfavorable conditions to the demon and continued to summon more heroes, and they summoned heroes, have them fight monsters and demons of that world, and they had grown near their limits. They would let the combined hero absorb them. As they continued to repeat the process, the combined hero was leagues stronger than it was back then, and they had never known when a strong demon lord might appear, and so well they would also make a stronger hero, is what he said, and that was everything, she exclaimed. Razel wondered that if that was the truth, then his enemies was the goddess and that hero, and he came there to make that goddess to owe him a favor, but to make her helper into a sacrifice, then there were no more favors for her. Razel also allowed him to test her story for a bit, and she agreed and mentioned that she didn't mind, and he contemplated to gathered some evidences with his satellite's analysis, and she pondered that it looked like detection magic, and wondered what he was trying to do. And Razel pondered that all the souls didn't even look like human anymore, and he mentioned that he indeed found traces of that magic tool, and that combined hero in the palace, and stated that it seemed like she was telling the truth. She inquired how he was able to scout the palace, and he stated that it was easy enough as long as he had some tools for analyzing. And she sat down while exclaiming that's his high-level stuff, and she asked if he even need her for those kinds of questions to begin with, and he agreed and mentioned that it wasn't for her, and added that he wouldn't have thought of searching the palace for the combined hero or anything, and in fact, he would have never known about himself becoming a sacrifice, and thanked her for the intel, and she stated that was nothing. Razel contemplated that he have to corner the goddess and made her think that she had no choice but to send him back to his world, and wondered what would be best method to trouble that goddess, and he guessed that taking that combined hero as a hostage might work, but that wouldn't help Demon Lord who gave him the intel. And suddenly he exclaimed I know, and she asked what, and he inquired if she wanted to beat the combined hero with her own hands, and she mentioned that he was the start of the unfavorable contracts and the murderer of her ancestors, and it would be her lifetime wish to defeat him, both as the current Demon Lord and as the descendants of the past Demon Lord. Demon Lord agreed, and Razel mentioned that it was settled then and asked about how personally guide her, and he promised that he could give her enough power to surpass the combined hero. And she asked why he was willing to go that far, and he states that he wanted to go back to his own world, and for that reason, he have to think of a way to corner that goddess into negotiation. And she mentioned that what he was saying was that there was something in it for him too, and asked where do she even start to get as strong as that combined hero. Razel exclaimed that Hero right then was only had about 1/5 of his strength, and that was a level she could reach even with just sheer effort. And she stated that 1/5 of his power was easier said than done, and he inquired if she was the strongest of her race, and stated that it would out somehow as long as she follows what he teach her and what she lack, and what she should do to make up for it wouldn't, and able to vision herself defeating Hero if she could do that much. And she agreed while he was willing to say that much and requested him, and he stated that it seemed like she had made her choice, and added that he too, and he would be counting on her, and mentioned that they were going in Spartan style, so she must get ready and stunned she requested him to do in moderation. He asked if there was a place that he could train her, and explained that he would like to have a simulation battle to see her current level, and she mentioned that there was only a few kilometers from there, and she denoted that it was around that spot, and he stated that it was pretty far and he would just do something about it. He told her to hold on tight, and she asked if they were flying up that close, and he agreed. He activated, and nervous she shrieked that she wasn't ready, but they reached the spot and she was down, and stated that she was dizzy and was distressed that they got there in flash, and Razel called it his bad, and she denied that was nothing and asked what was the magic item, and he mentioned that it was tool for the phantom world, and explained that people outside of that world saw them like they were doing healthy exercises, and she got stunned, and he told her that no matter how hard she lose, the people outside won't and able to see it, and she didn't need to worry. She thanked him for being considerate and contemplated that it was a thrash effect. Further, Razel stated that he assumed she was all ready if she had time for chit-chats, and she agreed and stated that time she was going all out, and he commanded to begin the stimulation. She wondered how would Razel attack, and she would stop any magic he comes at her with, and might be deflecting it to another direction would be better, but she noticed that he had gone, and contemplated that his mana was spreading around the air, and wondered if it was a magic to cover his own presence, and she couldn't hit him with her magic if she was right, and she recalled focus and thought that he would have to focus his magic in one spot the moment he attacks. Suddenly, she felt something behind her and she turned while attacking, but she got hit by the ball and spotted that it was a sports ball and pondered that it hurt a lot for one, and he stated that the ball would vanish in 3 seconds, and warned to try dodging that first. She stunned that he did telepathy and wondered if he wants her to dodge the ball, and just then he mentioned that the only magic he was using was body strengthening, and added that he was looking forward as to how the demon lord would look when she was serious, and astonished she stated that she would dodged it for sure. But another ball hit her again, and after some time she dodged one and contemplated that she was somehow able to block it then, and Razel called it a great job and added that he would like to test her magic's firepower next, and told her to use whatever magic she wanted on him. She wondered if she used to hit him with magic, and it looked to her that she was used to it or not, and felt that Razel had been dropping his speed, or maybe it never changed at all. She sighed and decided that she should focus on accuracy instead of firepower then. Stunned, Razel noticed that she raised a barrier, and she pondered that a frame cannon fought her, which was a problem, and thought that she should raise a simple barrier just in case it did hit. She concentrated her power and hit on his barrier and smirked while asking how, and Razel was stunned that she actually managed to damage his barrier. She inquired how was that, and instantly mentioned that he was exhausted, and Razel wondered if she actually broke his barrier, as one need quite the amount of mana to destroy the 3-dimensional barrier with 2-dimensional magic, and he certainly didn't raise the weak barrier, and he couldn't believe she overcame the gap by just putting in enough mana, and he gave his hand to her, and she held it while mentioning that she hit him. Razel wondered just how much firepower that demon lord could display with stronger magic, and he told that it was great, and added it to destroy the barrier whole, and she told him to wait, and started to let her recompose herself. Then, they took a break, and she inquired him about a barrier, and Razel mentioned that he would raise a barrier right then, and told her to use her strongest magic and hit it. She wondered if it might blow up the entire area, and inquired if her full power would really be fine, and Razel mentioned to not worry, and explained that the barrier absorbed any attack, and she contemplated how irregular that man was, and she admitted. She expressed her power and stated that was at full strength, and exerts her power, and noticed that the barrier was really absorbing it. She exhausted, and he asked if it was all, and she inquired if he got a problem, and she didn't reach her expectations, and as he told her to use everything, so he used everything, and he told her that she didn't need to feel down, and he would got one of that thing clear then, and she filled with tears asked what was that, and mentioned that he didn't even ask for a name. And she responded that he did that quite a lot, and asked if she was type to see nothing in her dreams. And she denied and stated that she was also at fault for not telling him her name, and mentioned that she was the Demon Lord, Mersha, and added that she would like to ask for her help in order to defeat that combined hero. He thanked her for her sincerity and told her that there was no need for her to feel down, and added that she have extremely strong magic powers, but her techniques on magic formation is still needed to be worked, and she apologized and asked if he could make it simpler. And he explained that the 3-part formula combined into magic output, that magic output pressed and done control pressure, and pressure becomes stronger when pressed, and added that the power of her magic was built upon that. And she agreed, and he explained that a dragon couldn't use complicated spells, and so a human could win by using that, and which means someone with high magic output like she could grow a lot more than an average person, and they already know what was needed to help her improve anyways. He stated an example, that a human couldn't begin to compare their mana to a dragon, but by practicing her magic control anyone could do the impossible, and inquired if she could get stronger by doing that. He responded that he would have her learn 3-dimensional magic first, and she asked 3-dimensional. And he first wondered how many culture shocks have he seen already, and he explained that the magic formations he was using was 2-dimensional, which means the magic she could use was limited to 1 per formation. And while 3-dimensional magic was limited, which means the magic she used could also, and Mersha added that it could become as large as she want, and he admitted. Then, she inquired how would he be able to use magic like that, and stated that she couldn't use analyze. And Razel replied that even he couldn't use magic like that the moment he was born, so he had a method of training for it, and she told him that he should have first said that first. Just then, she mentioned that she had one question, and inquired why would he wanted to train her, and mentioned that his goal was to return to his own world, and he could have just went and killed that hero himself. And Razel mentioned that it would work, but he had 2 reasons. The first one was to show his gratitude to her intel, and it was thanked for her telling him the truth, and she asked the other one. And he added that he would like to brought her to bring her his world as his party member after making her stronger, if she was fine with it, and she told him to wait a second, and inquired what does he mean. He mentioned that he have an opponent he couldn't beat by himself, and he always needed a second hand in defeating that guy, and he wanted to recruit someone worthy. So that's why he came to that world, and Mersha inquired if she faced someone that even he couldn't defeat. And Razel stated that it was the opposite in the simulation just then, and added that he confirmed she was perfect with confidence, and considering her position, he might be asking for the impossible, and she agreed and mentioned that she would go with him. She mentioned that while he was doing that to thank her, but to her, it felt like he was helping her for free, and she didn't like owing favors, and he thought that she was a kind soul, and reliable too, and thanked her. Mersha mentioned that she had something to ask about that, and he inquired what was that, and told her to tell him. And Mersha stated that she have a younger sister about the same level as her, but she got inflicted with a mysterious illness, and her body had been getting weaker ever since, and she would like to have her as a demon lord candidate after she go to his world, but at that rate, she won't be fit for any combat-related duties, and she thought that he could cure it. So she hoped he could at least examine her, and Razel pondered a mysterious illness, and he stated that he was out of her expertise, and added that he got it, what he would do, what he could, but no promises. Mersha thanked him and mentioned that they should hurry, and stated to fly back to the palace, and he admitted and told her to not vomit that time, and she responded that just thinking about it made her dizzy. Cecil was sitting while reading her book, and just then and she noticed and pondered if it was a space-time an attack, and wondered how, as they have Mersha's barrier protecting the place. And just then Razel and Mersha appeared, and Mersha waved at Cecil, and Cecil got stunned, and first she apologized Cecil for surprising her, and Cecil asked how, while mentioning that she thought that her barrier was supposed to be perfect, and inquired who was that person. And Mersha mentioned that his name was Razel, a strong man from another world, and she warned Cecil to behold, and stated that he destroyed her barrier like it was a piece of cake, and he possessed spells that could erase her magic like it was nothing, and exclaimed that he was just stupidly strong. Razel asked Mersha if she wasn't embarrassed, and she stated just a bit. Cecil stated that he was an incredible person, and Mersha mentioned that she brought him there in hopes of him having a chance to cure her illness, and added that it would be fine, and even if he couldn't cut it, knowing the cause would be good, and told her to let him have a look at her. Cecil stated that she understood and requested to do it, and he agreed and mentioned to do it. Then he went closer to Cecil, and first he greeted and told her that she needed not to be nervous, and it would be over in a second, and Cecil agreed and mentioned that she would be in his care. Mersha requested Razel to be gentle unlike her, and mentioned that her sister has a frail body, and Razel stated he thought so and stated to leave it to him. Mersha inquired what was hardened mana veins, and Razel explained that it was a symptom where she has thicker mana than normal, which affected the magic output in her mana circuits. Cecil asked if it was a difficult illness to treat, and Razel mentioned that it also existed in his world and all it needed was some common medicine to fix it. And he activated his storage and pocketed out the medicine, and stated that it was an artificial nanovirus medicine that smoothens the mana inside her body, and it would take a few days for the effect to kick in. But once she completely consumed it just once, and it would be in effect for the rest of her life. Mersha shrieked just once, and Razel gave Cecil the capsule and told her to swallow it, and Cecil admitted, and she turned and looked at Mersha, and Mersha called it okay and started to believe in him. Then Cecil swallowed the capsule, and Mersha asked how did it work, and Cecil mentioned that it doesn't feel like it. And Mersha screamed it wasn't working and asked what was the meaning of that. And while covering his ears, Razel mentioned that he said that it would take a few days, and asked if she minded if he advanced her body for a few days, and Mersha denied that she didn't. And then he mentioned it skipped about a week, and Cecil agreed and requested to do it. He did it, and Mersha asked Cecil how it was, and Cecil stated that the flow of mana inside her was completely different. And Mersha stunned, and she hugged Cecil while mentioning that she was so glad, and Rizala contemplated that was one of the problems off the list then.